Not everyone is willing to risk trying seafood they've never had before, but why shouldn't you? Just because these dishes might seem a little out there doesn't mean they're not worth trying. Give them a go and who knows, you might just find a new favorite. Sure, you've probably had lobster before, but you haven't really had it until you've tried real Maine lobster. Lobsters raised in the waters off the coast of Maine are technically the same species as those you'll find elsewhere, but the environment in which they're raised gives them a particularly delicious kind of meat that's sweeter and more tender. Maine lobsters also have slightly softer shells than their Canadian counterparts. And when you order by the pound, they usually contain more meat too. It also helps that Maine lobster populations are strictly regulated to ensure their continued survival as a species, so you can eat them guilt-free too. Unfortunately, if you want the real deal, you're going to have to shop around. Nowadays, it's mostly the Canadian lobster that's sold in grocery stores. Seaweed might be the last thing you think of when you think of seafood, but it's absolutely worth picking up at the grocery store, or if you live along the coast, pick up yourself. Everything about seaweed is amazing. It's full of vitamins and minerals, it's heavy on the antioxidants, and it's been shown to help you maintain gut health and a healthy weight. And there's a lot more to it than you might think too. Head to the shore and you'll find many different varieties of seaweed. You'll have to make sure your beach isn't protected, and each kind is going to require different methods of cooking. But if all works in your favor, then it's entirely possible to gather a year's worth of snacks in a single afternoon. Not a bad way to pinch a penny or two, right? There's a reason swordfish is often sold in steak form, and that's because it's pretty much perfect for anyone who's on the fence about fish. It doesn't taste fishy in the least, has a firm texture that's more meat-like than anything else, but still contains all the health benefits of fish. It's also a good choice if you're looking to be more responsible with your meal choices. According to the NOAA, swordfish were critically overfished in the mid-1990s, but that led to a re-examining of fishing guidelines, and today, swordfish is one of the most sustainable fish you can order. Opt for swordfish caught in the North Atlantic or Pacific Oceans, and you can enjoy your non-fishy fish with a perfectly clear conscience. Caviar is one of those dishes that every foodie would like to say they've eaten, but that many people are still reluctant to taste. Still, if you are interested in diving into the world of caviar, there's one particular kind that's perfect for getting your feet wet. Osetra is a fantastic entry-level caviar, one that's mild, nutty, and buttery rather than overwhelmingly briny or fishy. You can also pick up Osetra caviar for a fairly reasonable price, especially compared to some of the other types out there. Obviously, you're still going to be paying bundles of cash if you order it from a restaurant, but it's possible to purchase Osetra caviar online at a far more affordable rate. Even better, you'll be able to try it from the comfort of your own home, which means less room for embarrassment if it turns out you hate it.
You okay? You want a glass of water?
If you love salmon, then it's high time you got your hands on the best in the world, Irish salmon. Salmon has been a staple food in the country for thousands of years, and even pops up again and again in Irish folklore. Atlantic salmon are native to the country, and between spring and autumn, they can be found swimming in most rivers. In fact, it's surprisingly easy to catch a glimpse of wild salmon in the Weir, especially beneath the Salmon Weir Bridge, and around 180,000 people head to Ireland each year to cast their rod and reel in a salmon. Even Ireland's farm salmon is regarded as some of the best in the world. This is because salmon farms set up on the Irish west coast are subject to extreme tidal conditions, which means the fish are constantly swimming against currents, similar to the conditions wild salmon are raised in. At first glance, uni might not seem like the most appetizing seafood in the world, but you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. This weird little dish comes with some surprising benefits. In case you're unaware, uni is the part of a sea urchin that produces roe. In other words, it's a sea urchin's reproductive organs. And okay, fair enough, that's kinda gross. But don't run away just yet. While uni is very much an acquired taste, there are a few good reasons why you should give it a go. Firstly, you'll always be able to say you tried it, which is never a bad thing. You'll also be supporting a pretty neat industry. Uni are almost always harvested by hand, and those hands typically belong to one of a group of specially trained sea women, who spend their days diving and gathering sea urchins to sell and support their families. Finally, there's the fact that uni is traditionally seen as an aphrodisiac. If that's still not a good enough reason to give it a go, then maybe it's not the uni that's the problem here, don't you think? Sea cucumbers definitely aren't going to win any beauty contest anytime soon. But presentation isn't everything, and you might just be glad you gave them a chance. Impressively, some types of sea cucumber are considered such delicacies that they can cost more than $3,000 a kilogram. What's more, dozens of people have actually died trying to get their hands on them, usually as a result of decompression sickness whilst diving. Part of what makes them so valuable is their high fucosylated glycosaminoglycan content, which is a chemical known to help with joint problems. There's also an environmental slant to all of this too. In 2019, the Marine Stewardship Council certified the world's first sustainable sea cucumber fishery, an important step towards improving the world's oceans. This is because sea cucumbers feed on organic waste and keep the oceans clean. Inevitably, the more you eat, the more the industry will expand, and the more sea cucumbers that are grown, the better off everybody becomes. That's never a bad thing. Yes, okay, so lionfish are pretty hugely venomous, but don't panic. Properly prepared, they're perfectly safe to eat. And they're pretty tasty too, which is always nice. But there is another reason you should give lionfish a go. You'll be doing the world's oceans a favor. Lionfish are native to the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific, but in the 1990s, they started showing up off the Florida coast. This is a problem since lionfish are also incredibly prolific breeders, spread to extreme depths, and devastate the native ecosystems they invade. But one of the best ways to protect these ocean habitats is to organize large-scale lionfish hunts. And one of the best ways to make those more popular is to create a market for lionfish as a food. So eat up! Mother Earth is counting on you! When you see bouillabaisse on menus, most of the time it's just a sort of fishy soup. Even in Marseille, France, bouillabaisse has become a little less than traditional. In fact, when New York Times journalist Elaine Sciolino headed there to seek out the real thing, she found it wasn't as easy to find as she thought. To get her hands on genuine bouillabaisse, she had to drive out to a small fishing village on the coast, speak to the locals, and convince a chef to cook it as a favor. But according to Sciolino, it was all totally worth it. The authentic version she tried was made from 5 different kinds of fresh rockfish, tomatoes, olive oil, fennel, and spices like turmeric and saffron. She described this kind of bouillabaisse as an acquired taste, but one that felt more like an artistic experience than a simple meal. You're probably aware that champagne can only be produced in the Champagne region of France, but what you might not know is that there's a fish version of this rule too. According to the same European laws that protect champagne, Arbroath Smokies can only be produced within 5 miles of the town centre of Arbroath, Scotland. These fish are essentially smoked haddock, but they're still smoked in the same way they have been since the 1800s. Instead of thin slices, they're served up in fillets that are golden brown on the outside and creamy on the inside. Of course, to get the real thing, you'll have to order them online, or get yourself over to Scotland. There are some dishes that, when they're made right, are filled to the brim with the taste of wherever they're from. That's definitely the case with jambalaya. Done correctly, it's the perfect mix of Spanish and French-inspired flavors. Essentially, it's New Orleans on a plate.
Jambalaya!
And if you're looking for the ultimate in Southern comfort food, then seafood jambalaya is the way to go. There's no right way to make this dish, but there are a few things you should look for. Traditional Spanish and French spices, andouille sausage, and damn good seafood. If you've never tried crawfish before, this is the way to do it. If you're a seafood fan, you may have tried lox before. Unfortunately, if you're picking it up at the grocery store, it can often be pretty expensive. The good news, however, is that there's a much more affordable version available, and it's called Gravadlax. This is essentially a fancy name for cured salmon, and like with so many other things, you might just be better off making it yourself. While ordering Gravadlax at a restaurant might get you a cheap, tasty version of lox, curing a salmon fillet with salt, sugar, and spices over the course of a few days might just turn out even better. Get it right, and breakfast will never be the same again. If you see garum pop up on a menu anytime soon, you've got to give it a go. Why? Because you'll be getting a taste of ancient Rome's most popular condiment.
It's like a delicate but rich broth made from sort of roasted langoustine or shrimp shells.
The ancient Romans used this stuff in everything, from pork to fish dishes to wine. In fact, garum was in such high demand that the supply chain shaped a network of trade routes that sprawled across the ancient world. Garum is made using the guts of fresh fish, which are fermented into a condiment that turns out salty, tangy, and just a little briny. A treat for both modern and ancient taste buds. Everything's better when it's fried, right? Well, catfish is no exception, and anyone who's after some authentic Southern comfort food ought to give this one a go. Now, catfish might have a reputation as a bottom feeder, but give it a chance. It's a mild fish with firm flesh that holds up well to being fried. And it doesn't just taste great either. Eating catfish is environmentally responsible too. According to Seafood Watch, domestic farm-raised catfish is one of the best choices for anyone who'd prefer to eat it in a way that won't impact on the world's delicate ecosystems. Oysters are definitely a love or hate kind of thing. But if you do love them, you'll want to get your hands on the best in the world. And those are the ones that come from Ireland. For oyster fans, the best time to visit the country is in September, for the Galway International Oyster and Seafood Festival. It's no coincidence that the festival is held in the fall. It's only then that the native, flat, and wild Atlantic oysters come into season. They're harvested after they spawn, and once they're gone until the next year. Best of all, the different marine environments around the country produce oysters that taste very different to the connoisseur. This means you could easily take an oyster-based tour around the Emerald Isle and get to try countless variations on some of the best shellfish on the planet. Not too long ago, Grimsby was the biggest fishing port in the world, despite the fact that the town itself is actually pretty small. But with all that fish going through the town's port, it's not surprising they've perfected methods of preserving it, namely by smoking it. If you're looking for some of the world's best smoked fish, Grimsby is where you want to be. It's still made the same way it's been made for almost 2 centuries, and just like Arbroath Smokies, fish marketed as Grimsby traditionally smoked fish has to come from one of only 5 area companies. So think of it this way: a taste of Grimsby smoked fish is a taste of something an industry has had hundreds of years to perfect. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Madagascar might not be the first place you think of when you think of caviar, but Rova Caviar is going to hit the market in a big way. It's coming from a company called Osetra, which owns a caviar farm that was founded on Lake Mantassoa in 2009. They're starting to get seriously popular though, and in 2019, their export numbers hit 5 tons per year. Of course, that popularity comes with its problems, and in order to get your hands on Rova Caviar, you'll have to go to a high-end seafood restaurant and hope they haven't run out. If you love clams, and quahogs in particular, then there's only one place you need to go: Cape Cod, the home of stuffies. That's the local term for stuffed quahogs, and any seafood restaurant on the Cape will have their own version of this delicacy. From the secret spice blend of Arnold's Lobster and Clam Bar to the lemony flavor of Spanky's Clam Shack stuffies, all the way to the homemade chorizo stuffed stuffies of the family-friendly Fresh Catch. Well, let's just say that it'll be more than worth the trip. Of course, it helps that these super fresh stuffed clams are usually served alongside a whole host of other delicious seafood dishes. There's a reason Cape Cod is named after a fish, you know. Right off the bat, there's one big plus to eating eels: they only have one bone. If you're the kind of person who freaks at the idea of getting a bone caught in your throat, then eels are the seafood for you. But that's not all. Eels are also incredibly rich and fatty, as well as hugely versatile, being able to be served in any number of different ways. In the future, it's entirely possible you're going to start seeing much more eel on high-end menus. Smoked eel in particular is becoming more popular at those restaurants that are looking for a little non-traditional luxury on their seafood menus. And despite being a delicacy since at least the 18th century, eels really are as non-traditional as you can get. When Jamie Oliver released his recipe for paella and added chorizo, Spain flew into a unanimous rage over his adulteration of one of their most popular traditional dishes.
It trended for weeks. And I had death threats and all sorts because of a bit of sausage.
Of course, in Spain, they take their paella very seriously. And if you only ever try one kind of paella in your lifetime, it ought to be the real thing, and that means no chorizo. While some types of traditional paella are made with meat, seafood paella has become the most common variant. It's typically made with mussels, shrimp, and other shellfish, and you can get the real deal at pretty much any restaurant in the country. Just as important is the traditional setting. Paella should be cooked in a large batch and shared among family and friends. Often, the best paella is also made from fresh seafood in restaurants situated just a stone's throw from the ocean. That's the Spanish way of doing it.
By the way, just FYI, it tastes better with chorizo.
Not all seafood can be found on the menu at your local fish restaurant, and nothing illustrates that better than spirulina. Spirulina is a type of single-celled microbe that grows in both salt and freshwater, and it has a very long history behind it. Not only was it grown and eaten by the Aztecs, but it might also be the future of space food. NASA proposes it can be grown in space as a viable source of nutrients. Back on Earth, it's absolutely worth picking up some spirulina when you can. It's more an ingredient rather than a dish, but it's filled to the brim with antioxidants, is a known anti-inflammatory, can lower cholesterol, and may reduce blood pressure and risk of cancer. Get your hands on some next time you're at the grocery store, and it might just change your morning smoothie game for good. One thing worth knowing about Asian carp is that, as the name suggests, they're considered an invasive species in the United States. Asian carp have spread throughout the waterways of the Mississippi and Illinois rivers, devastating native fish populations, and to make matters worse, they have no real predators to speak of. Except for man, that is. You might see Asian carp listed as black carp, grass carp, bighead carp, or silver carp, but they're all worth trying. Often these massive fish can come across as pretty standard whitefish, but they're the perfect choice for cooks who are willing to mix things up a bit. In many taste tests, Asian carp have been ranked above other kinds of whitefish, mostly due to the carp's impressive ability to absorb the flavors of whatever it's cooked in. Get creative, you won't regret it. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more MASH videos about your favorite dishes are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.